House, Frank announced over the phone, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. Got a great price too. The new owners move in next week, so if there's anything of your mother's junk you want, you better come get it now. I gripped my phone tighter, willing my voice to stay steady. You sold Mom's house? Without telling me. Hey, I don't need your permission, kid. I'm her husband, remember? Or was, until he paused and I could practically hear the fake grief in his voice. Well, she'd want me to move on. Start fresh. Start fresh. That's what Frank called selling the Victorian house my great-grandfather had built, the home where 4 generations of my family had lived, the place where my mother had taken her last breath just 3 months ago. My name is Emma Mitchell, and until my mother married Frank Turner 5 years ago, I thought I understood what family meant. Mom and I had been a team since Dad died when I was 12. We'd faced everything together. The hard years when she worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, the triumph when she finally opened her own bookstore, the quiet evenings spent reading in the window seat my great-grandfather had built. Then Frank came along. He swept Mom off her feet with his charming smile and smooth talk about real estate investments. I was away at college by then, studying law at Berkeley, too far away to see what he really was. By the time I realized it was too late, Mom was in love and Frank had moved into our family home. I'll be by tomorrow to pick up Mom's things, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Make it quick, Frank replied. I've got people coming to clear out the furniture this weekend. High-end antiques buyers. This stuff might be sentimental to you, but it's worth a pretty penny to collectors. I ended the call before he could say anything else. Standing in my small San Francisco apartment, I looked at the photo on my desk, Mom and me in front of the house on my high school graduation day. She was beaming with pride, her arm around my shoulders. The golden afternoon light caught the distinctive stained glass window above the front door, the one my great-grandmother had designed. What Frank didn't know, what Mom had made sure he would never know, was that 3 weeks before she died, she had called me home for an urgent conversation. I remembered that day clearly. Mom was already weak from the cancer, but her mind was sharp as ever. She'd handed me an envelope, her hands trembling slightly. The house is yours now, Emma, she'd said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've transferred the deed to your name. Frank doesn't know, and he can't know. Not until after. I tried to protest, but she'd been adamant. I've watched him, Emma, seen how he looks at the house, at the antiques, at everything your great-grandparents built. He's not what I thought he was. Promise me you'll protect it. I promised, holding her hand as she explained how she'd worked with her lawyer in secret, using her maiden name to avoid suspicion. The deed transfer was completely legal, filed quietly with the county under my name. Now, as I packed an overnight bag for the drive to Sacramento, I touched the small safe where I kept the deed. Mom had known, had seen through Frank's facade in those final months. She protected our legacy the only way she could. The drive from San Francisco to Sacramento took longer than usual, traffic crawling through the Bay Area before finally opening up on I-80. As the familiar neighborhoods of my hometown appeared, my chest tightened. I hadn't been back since the funeral, couldn't bear to see Frank living in our house like he owned it. Well, technically he didn't own it. Not anymore. Not ever, really, though he didn't know that yet. The house looked exactly the same as it had for the past 100 years. 3 stories of Victorian elegance with a wraparound porch where Mom and I used to drink lemonade on summer evenings. Frank's expensive SUV sat in the driveway, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. He opened the door before I could knock, looking irritatingly pleased with himself. About time you showed up. I've got boxes in the living room. Try to be quick about it. I stepped past him into the foyer, my heart aching at the familiar scent of lemon furniture polish and old wood. Mom had always insisted on using the same polish her grandmother had used, keeping the walnut paneling gleaming. The living room was full of boxes, our family heirlooms tossed in carelessly. I saw my great-grandmother's Tiffany lamp wrapped in newspaper, the leather-bound first editions Mom had collected stacked like ordinary paperbacks. The antiques dealers are coming Saturday, Frank said, following me into the room. High-end guys from San Francisco. They're practically salivating over the furniture. Do you know how much Victorian pieces go for these days? I did actually. Mom had made sure I understood the value of everything in the house, not just sentimental but financial. The walnut dining set alone was worth close to $50,000. You can't sell these things, Frank, I said quietly, picking up a framed photo of Mom as a little girl sitting on the very porch swing he probably already promised to some dealer. He laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Of course I can. I'm the husband, remember. Everything your mother owned is legally mine now. I set down the photo carefully. Actually, that's not true. What are you talking about? His voice sharpened slightly. Mom left everything to me. The house, the furniture, all of it. She transferred ownership before she died. He stared at me for a moment, then laughed again, but there was an edge to it now. Nice try, kid. But I think I'd know if my wife had done something like that. Would you? I asked, pulling the deed from my bag. Like you knew about her private bank account or the safety deposit box she kept in her maiden name. The smirk faltered slightly. What are you talking about? Mom saw through you, Frank. In the end, she understood exactly what kind of man you are. She protected what was ours. His face darkened. Give me that, he snapped, snatching the deed from my hands. I let him take it, watching as he scanned the document, his expression changing from dismissive to confused to something close to panic. This can't be legal, he sputtered. I'm her husband. She couldn't just. She could and she did. Everything was done properly, filed with the county weeks before she died. The house is mine, Frank. So is everything in it. He stared at me, his face reddening. I've already sold it. The papers are signed. The buyers. Can't buy what you don't own, I finished for him. Maybe you should call them. And the antiques dealers. And your realtor. I'm sure they'll all be very interested to learn you were selling property that doesn't belong to you. You little. He took a step toward me, his hands clenching into fists. Careful, I said softly. I've got copies of everything. One wrong move, and fraud charges will be the least of your worries. The silence that followed was deafening. Frank stood there, the deed crumpled in his fists, his face a storm of rage and disbelief. Outside, a car drove past, its tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Somewhere upstairs, the old grandfather clock chimed 4 times, just as it had every hour of my childhood. You can't do this, he finally said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Your mother, she wouldn't. My mother, I cut him off, knew exactly what she was doing. She protected our family's legacy from you. Now, I think you should leave. Leave? This is my home. I shook my head slowly. No, Frank, it never was. You just thought it was yours to take, like everything else you've tried to steal from us. He opened his mouth to argue, but I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. The deed was ironclad, the transfer legal and complete. He had no claim to the house, the furniture, any of it. I'll fight this, he threatened, but weakly. Go ahead, I replied calmly. I'm sure the court would be very interested in how you tried to sell property you didn't own, not to mention the items you've already sold from the house. Mom kept excellent inventory records, you know. His face went pale at that. We both knew what he'd been doing these past 3 months, selling off smaller pieces, things he thought wouldn't be missed. But Mom had documented everything, and now those sales would come back to haunt him. Frank's unraveling was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. First came the denial. He spent 20 minutes on the phone with his lawyer, his voice rising steadily as he realized just how thoroughly Mom had outmaneuvered him. Then came anger, pacing the living room like a caged animal, alternating between threats and attempts at manipulation. We can work something out, he said, trying to sound reasonable. Split the proceeds from the sale. That's fair, right? Your mother would want us to be fair. I sat in my great-grandmother's wing-back chair, the one he'd probably planned to sell for a small fortune, and watched him unravel. My mother, I said quietly, wanted me to protect our family's home from you. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. You ungrateful little. He caught himself, visibly trying to regain control. Think about this rationally. The buyers are paying $2 million for this place. That's $1 million each if we split it. You're young. You could do a lot with that kind of money. I looked around the room, at the built-in bookshelves my great-grandfather had crafted by hand, at the ceiling medallion Mom had carefully restored one summer when money was tight. This house isn't for sale, Frank. Not now, not ever. His face darkened. You'll regret this. I've got connections in this town. I can make things very difficult for you. Like you made things difficult for Mom. I asked, watching him freeze. Those last few months when she was sick, when you were already selling off her jewelry, did you think she didn't notice? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I needed the money for her medical bills. No, you didn't. Her insurance covered everything. You needed the money for your gambling debts. That hit home. His face went pale. How did you? Mom knew everything, Frank. She just couldn't face it while she was sick. But she made sure I would know. She kept records. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos. Screenshots of his online gambling accounts, records of pawn jewelry, bank statements showing suspicious transfers. Mom had documented it all in her final months, working with her lawyer to build a case even as cancer ravaged her body. She didn't want me to use these unless I had to, I said, watching his expression shift from shock to fear. She hoped you'd just walk away when the time came. But we both know you're not going to do that. Are you? He sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking much older. What do you want? I want you out, today, and I want everything you've sold returned. That's impossible. Some of those pieces are already. Then you'll repay their value. Every piece, Frank. Mom's jewelry, the silver, the first editions you snuck out when you thought no one was watching. All of it. He laughed, but it was hollow. With what money? You just said yourself I've got gambling debts. I smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. Actually, you've got about $800,000 in your offshore account, the one you opened in the Caymans last year. That stopped him cold. How could you possibly know about that? Mom's lawyer was very thorough. Did you really think you could hide money from a woman who ran her own business for 20 years? She tracked every penny you tried to squirrel away. The next few hours were a blur of activity. I called Mom's lawyer, who arrived with the sheriff in tow. Frank's realtor showed up, flustered and apologetic when she learned she'd been trying to sell property her client didn't own. The buyer's agent was less understanding, threatening legal action until she saw the valid deed in my name. Through it all, Frank sat in stunned silence, watching as his carefully constructed plans crumbled around him. By sunset, he was loading his personal belongings into his SUV while the sheriff supervised. You'll never get away with this, he tried one last time as he carried out his last box. People in this town know me. They trust me. They trusted you. I corrected him. Until now. How do you think they'll feel when they learn you tried to sell stolen property? That you were gambling away your dying wife's jewelry? He slammed the SUV's trunk shut with more force than necessary. You think you're so smart, just like your mother, but you're making a mistake. This house, all this old junk, it's a burden. You'll see. I stood on the porch in the same spot where Mom and I had spent countless evenings talking about our dreams. No, Frank, the only mistake was Mom trusting you. But she fixed that in the end, didn't she? As his car disappeared down the street, Mom's lawyer, Patricia, joined me on the porch. You handled that well, she said. Your mother would be proud. She knew what he was, I said softly. In the end, she knew. Patricia nodded. She wanted to confront him, you know. But she was worried he'd do something drastic if he knew she was onto him. This way, she knew you'd be protected. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I took a leave of absence from my law firm and moved back home temporarily. There was so much to do, documenting everything in the house, tracking down items Frank had sold, reinstating the property insurance in my name. The local newspaper ran a story about Frank's attempted fraud. Other victims came forward. Elderly clients whose antiques he'd undervalued and bought, only to sell at massive profits. The district attorney's office opened an investigation. But the real work was emotional. Every room held memories, every object a story. I found Mom's diary hidden in her dresser, its pages full of her growing suspicions about Frank, her determination to protect our family's legacy. I was a fool, she'd written. But I won't let him take what generations of our family built. Emma will know what to do. The community rallied around me in ways I hadn't expected. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought over her famous enchiladas and told me stories about Mom from before I was born. Mr. Chen from the hardware store helped me track down period-appropriate materials to restore the back porch. One morning, as I was sorting through old photographs in the attic, I found a letter from my great-grandmother to my grandmother, written in 1952. This house is more than wood and glass, she'd written. It's the heart of our family. Every nail, every floorboard, every window holds our stories. Guard it well, my darling. Pass it on with love. That letter became my guide as I began the process of not just reclaiming the house, but reviving it. I hired restoration experts to repair what time had worn. The stained glass window above the front door gleamed again, casting rainbow shadows across the foyer floor. Frank's prediction about the house being a burden proved exactly wrong. The very things he saw as dollar signs, the antique furniture, the architectural details, the history, were what made it priceless. 6 months after I confronted Frank, I got the call I'd been waiting for. He'd been indicted on multiple counts of fraud and theft. The DA had found a pattern of deception going back years before he met Mom. He took a plea deal that required him to repay his victims, including the full value of everything he'd sold from our house. That evening, I sat in the window seat Mom had loved so much, looking out at the garden where she taught me the names of flowers. The house felt alive again, filled with the warmth she'd always maintained. My phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. The last of Mom's jewelry had been located at a pawn shop in Reno. Everything would be returned by the end of the week. I smiled, touching the key pendant Mom had given me for my 16th birthday. She'd worn it every day until she got sick, telling me it was more than just jewelry. It was a symbol of our connection to this place, to our history. A year after that confrontation in the living room, I stood in front of the house on a warm spring evening. The roses Mom had planted were blooming, their scent filling the air. The porch swing creaked gently in the breeze, just as it had for 4 generations. I decided to keep my apartment in San Francisco, commuting when necessary for work. But the house would always be home. Not just for me, but for the future generations Mom had fought to protect. Inside on the mantel, I placed 3 photographs. One of my great-grandparents on their wedding day, standing proudly in front of their new home. One of Mom and me on my graduation day, and between them, a new addition. Mom in her garden the summer before she got sick, her face radiant as she tended her beloved roses. Frank had seen the house as a commodity, something to be sold off piece by piece. He never understood that its true value wasn't in its antiques or its architecture, but in the legacy of strong women who had called it home. Mom knew. She made sure that legacy would continue. Sometimes in the quiet evenings, sitting in the same spots where 4 generations of my family had sat before me, I feel Mom's presence. Not in a ghostly way, but in the essence of the place she fought so hard to protect. In the smooth wood of the banister, worn by countless hands. In the garden she tended with such care. In the very bones of this house that has sheltered our family's dreams for over a century. Frank was wrong about one more thing. This house isn't a burden, it's a gift.